3, 2, 1.
We'd like to welcome you to another edition of Grok Talk, brought to you by New Hampshire's leading conservative blog site, GraniteGrok.com. We are your feared, extremist, right-wing, hard-charging, gun-toting, opinionated, outspoken, rabble-rousing, letter-writing, radio microphone stomping conservatives and rational libertarians. So get ready for more news and opinion you could only get from GraniteGrok.com.
Grok Talk.
Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. I can't
Yes.
hear myself. Good morning. Ah, there we go. Everything appears to be working.
Steve,
This
the
morning.
face of Grok Talk.
I'm not.
Yes, you are.
Face. We need another face.
Yours
Face.
is the first
Faces.
face
Faces.
everybody sees on the live stream.
Oh, well, we could definitely improve listenership and viewership if we change that. That's just my opinion. Oh, hang on. I got to check your mic. Can you talk again some more?
Hello, 1, 2, 3, 4.
Let me just check your volumes. We've adjusted the board a little, and we want to make sure that
Yeah,
we're not
well, I can't hear
blowing
myself.
anybody out. That's him, not me.
Well,
Okay.
if you can get the lady who appeared in the Protein World's Subway ad over in London to come in every Saturday morning, we could certainly use her as the face of Grok Talk.
We could use Sarah. She's up there on the wall.
Yes, that's true.
Anyway, welcome
So
to the show.
that's a mascot.
Welcome to the month of May. It is May 2nd. We are broadcasting from Concord, New Hampshire.
Yes, the day after the International Workers' Day.
Right.
Remember when she was first introduced onto the scene and Rush said something along the lines of guns, God, and babies, oh my? I think it still applies.
So we have a good show for you. Greg Kline from Red, Maryland. We've had him on the show before. He's connected in Maryland. He's got a lot of things going on down there. The Red Maryland Radio Network, you can see them at redmaryland.com. Conservative bloggers and activists, and we're going to have him on the program to talk to us about his view from inside the state of the Baltimore Riots. Max Abramson's coming in to do our legislative update, and then we're going to do some other stuff with Max at 9:30. Ron Moore, our storm chaser, is going to come in and give us a little our segment update, our monthly segment update on climate and weather.
I need to know, are we going to have a bad winter as what we just had? Because it's time to buy wood again.
Yeah, I haven't. I'm a little behind on my long range forecast listening. I usually at least once a week try to take some time to go to Weather Bell and listen to the weekly update that you can get for free. Premium subscribers get a lot more out of that. But Saturday summary at weatherbell.com. Joe Bastardi gives you lots of details. It's usually about 10 to 13 minutes long. And you learn a lot of things about the way the planet and the weather work. Even if you don't want to agree with his position as far as global warming or any of that other stuff, you learn about water temperatures and how these things affect the weather. And he shows you the history of past years that look exactly the same and how the weather was the same that year, and that's how they use these analog years to figure out what their predictions are for their paying customers who want to know how to respond to their business activities, things they're going to do, mostly that are affected by weather. So, I mean, if you're in agriculture, if you're in any kind of mineral business, drilling or whatever, anything where you're outdoors, shipping, you want to know what the weather's going to be like. And they do long-range forecasts, and you can pay for all the very, very dirty details down to the, the minus fine details about what the expectations are for the weather. Now, they were pretty right on, and they've been pretty right on.
Last 2 years.
Last couple of years that we've been paying attention to them. They nailed the winters. They've been pretty good with the spring so far. And I would expect that their long-range forecasts are probably about as reliable as you're going to get. So you can go to weatherbell.com and check it out. There's every week on the right side, and probably by lunchtime or so, I think, the update for every Saturday, where you can watch the previous one. And he talks a lot about, climate stuff. And sometimes he has to have a climate rant because the TV will come out and they'll start talking about, the polar vortex. And so he did an entire thing where he explained what that all was. It's just Alberta Clippers. We've had them forever, blah, blah, blah. Whenever they come out and talk about the drought in California, he came out and said, well, take a look. Here's when the last time there was a drought. This is what the oceans look like. And then this is what it looks like now. Geez, gosh, doesn't it look the same? That's why, it's not man-made. You can go back and see And he shows it to you. You learn about the weather. You learn about...
Well, it's a little bit man-made because, A, we got all that agriculture and we're pumping the aquifers.
Well,
B...
in the absence of all that stuff,
yeah,
the weather that occurs that results in the behavior, regardless of man's influence, is a result of solar, ocean temperatures, and things like volcano eruptions.
And cosmic rays.
Well, that affects
cosmic
cloud
rays.
cover, but that's sun and some other stuff.
Well, the cosmic rays and their effect on the formation of condensation nuclei, i.e. clouds, is triggered by the greater or lesser amount of cosmic rays approaching the atmosphere, which are blown back literally by the solar wind a lot of the time. And then when the sun has a quiet period, we get more cosmic rays making it through and more clouds and cooler temperatures. But no, I wasn't saying, oh my God, it's global warming.
Oh,
or
no.
oh my God, it's always man's fault. What I'm saying is California is messed up. I tried not to use the other word because of human activity. Because of human activity. On the one hand, there is a lot of agriculture, and not all of it is suitable for California because there's no market for water. People are getting, or were getting, more than made sense because they weren't paying the full cost. But on the other hand, you've got government, both federal and state, doing stupid stuff like actually letting water flow to the sea in the interest of those dumb minnows. No, not Rachel, the fish. That live in the San Francisco or actually the San Francisco Bay in the Delta, and if we actually built the dams instead of trying to destroy them, and if we actually used the water that we had for agriculture and drinking water, we wouldn't have a shortage. And if we allowed market price, the crop mix might change a little, but the land would still be very fertile.
Yeah, I also think that this is a case of government exacerbating a problem that government started in the first place. Way back before Moonbeam became governor, his dad was the one who was putting in the vast water infrastructure into place for California, knowing that this is normally a lot of it is desert. And then Moonbeam and his cohort of hippie environmentalists came in, and they've started to take down the dams. They've disabled a few other things, and they have refused to continue on. You keep hearing from the left, oh, government's all about infrastructure, all about infrastructure. Well, since 1970, they haven't built a single thing to help with their infrastructure of any size at all.
So do you mean literally Jerry Brown's dad, or do you mean Jerry Brown's prior incarnation as governor?
No, his dad. His dad was governor before.
And he's been governor twice now. You'd think they'd learn something from that.
No, they didn't.
The problem, I guess, is that people don't understand that the place that they live and the agriculture that they engage in is impossible without the water infrastructure that they have been dismantling.
Yes.
So they've dismantled it, and now they're sitting here going, gee, it used to be such a great place. What the heck happened? And the Democrats and all the people who dismantled the infrastructure are blaming the climate.
And the farmers now.
And now the farmers. But it's not their fault. I mean, you went in and you irrigate the valley. You make it possible to turn it into this massive cornucopia, this breadbasket that can produce all this food. They just need water. That's all they need. And then you tear that apart. You say, you can't have the water. We have to protect the tiny little fish.
And there's 8. They've only found 8 of these little delta smelts. That's it.
Oh, really? So that few? Oh, wow.
Yeah.
The other problem is even if you agree with that, you still need to replace that water. So they've had decades to do desalination plants. They could have invested in all kinds of infrastructure to guarantee that California had plenty of water for the people that they encouraged to come and live there. And they didn't do it.
Well, that's okay. They're now discouraging people from living there, partly with tax policy and partly with environmental policy. Yeah. The question is, where's the agriculture going to go? I mean, some of the agriculture was totally ludicrous, like almonds and rice paddies. But, the plain fact is that it's a beautiful place with wonderful climate, nice valleys. Even stuff down by the coast that you'd think might be salt marsh isn't. It's where they grow artichokes and broccoli and things. I mean, the cornucopia's got nothing on it. California, as a country, would be practically self-sufficient. They got oil off the coast. They got everything they need if they would just manage it properly.
All that will be left is the movie industry and the porn industry, which is technically a movie industry, because those are that's probably all they're going to have.
Well, even they are moving out, the porn folks, because of
the
all
taxes
the
and all the regulations.
onerous regulations.
Yes.
But here's the other thing.
They even screwed that up.
Yeah. Yeah, how do you screw porn up? But, the other thing that's of major laughability is you hear from the Democrats, income inequality is a bad thing. And they've been ranting about it for a few years now. But if you go to California, and if you believe the writings of Professor Victor Davis Hanson, who writes often on The Corner,
and
or
by the way,
National
lives
Review,
in the Central Valley.
And that's what I was going to. He's a farmer. He's
He
an
lives right-
academic, but a farmer, and he writes often about the lawlessness that he is now seeing outside of
any headset.
Yeah, sit there, Max. It's easier. It's better for the camera.
And you're looking very spiffy today in your suit.
But as I was going to say, he's writing about the lawlessness and the absence of government outside of these very rich enclaves that have very green grass because they can afford to pay for the water. And he's saying it's being hollowed out. That pretty soon California is going to be the most unequal state in the union because you're going to have all of the high-rich movie-type folks, Silicon Valley-type folks, and then you have all the illegal immigrants coming across basically as a slow-moving barbarian horde, taking what they want and not obeying the law, and there's nothing that government is doing to provide the rule of law.
No, I mean, first you have to provide the rule of law, and secondly, there's nothing wrong with inequality. It's called incentive.
No, at this, you're right to a point, but
inequality forced by the government is a problem.
Yes.
Inequality caused by hollowing out of the middle class by incorrect. I think that's the one that's live, Max.
I just try that. Go ahead and talk.
Just testing. How are you guys doing?
Good.
That's the one. Okay.
You sound a little windy today.
Yeah. This one's still on, I think, from the sound of it.
Okay.
That's better.
Try that.
Yep.
There we go. Are you on now? No, that doesn't sound like it either. Try
Steve's
that.
lost control of his board.
No. Talk again.
Good morning. It's beautiful weather
we have
today.
Max
See,
live.
here's the problem. I have 4 headsets that Skip and I are coming through the same board, so we're on the same slider on here. And then there's 4 other headsets here, and I know you're one, but I don't know which one you're wearing. So anyway.
I think what we need is little colored tags. That's probably the best thing.
Didn't we start this off in the pre-show talking about Mickey, Goofy, and
Yeah, we were going to
Daffy?
label them with something.
Yeah, well, I think
cartoon characters or something.
Hang on a minute, put some ears on.
There you go.
Yeah, I think we're pretty close to that.
Croc Disney.
We're pretty close to that on a good day.
And Max's face is saying it all. It's like, you guys are Looney Tunes.
We could
Well,
do
that
it,
too.
actually.
No, that's
We could do Looney Tunes. That would work.
that's a different cartoon company.
Dun, dun, dun.
Actually, that's not what I was thinking. We had Carly Fiorna on last week, and one of the biggest questions asked by engineers, especially electrical engineers all over the world, is Hewlett-Packard had the world's. When they bought Compaq had bought digital equipment. They bought the DEC Alpha.
I used to
DEC
work
Alpha
for DEC.
was the world's fastest processor, had the highest floating point benchmarks ever, had tremendous integer benchmarks. It was just fast. It was just a screamer. It was the race car of microprocessors. And all the supercomputers and high-end servers and high-end workstations were now being built on the DEC Alpha. And everyone loved it. It was a true RISC processor. It followed the philosophy exactly, didn't have any instructions that got in the way of performance. It was the best thing out there. Hewlett-Packard bought up Compaq, so now they owned the DEC Alpha. Under Carly Fiorina, under Carly Fiorina, they didn't use the DEC Alpha. They made a terrible deal with Intel to use the Itanium, now called the Itanic, because it was a very badly designed instruction set architecture. It was the rule in processors is, if you want to make a processor fast, you keep it simple. Keep it simple, stupid. If you make it too complicated, it's going to be slow. And this was the one person. Now she's running for president. This was the one person who was key in making the decision.
This may not be a bad idea, though. What if she does that to government and makes it slow? We're going to take a quick break.
Well, yes, but
hang on, we're taking a break.
Max's point is more complex.
I know it is, but on the simple level, and he's probably right, and we can talk about that
at
9:30 after we do our legislative update. We're going to take a break first.
This is a coalition of New Hampshire taxpayers. We're located at 8 North Main in Concord, New Hampshire. This is a repository for all things conservative and municipal. So if you have a problem in your town, your school, your budget committee, the right to know law, and now at the top of our list is voter fraud. You have a tip for us, some information for us, you want to join or help us out, cnht.org.
Hi, this is Rich Gerard, host of Gerard at Large in the Morning, the Manchester area's only locally owned, locally operated, focused, and interested, riveting radio show, heard live every Monday through Friday from 6 to 9 on 90.7 FM WLMW, New Hampshire Family Radio, and available 24/7 live or archived at gerardatlarge.com. Be sure to tune in.
Oh, you never know what we're going to talk about.
Titanic, I like it.
We're going to talk about legislation. We're going to do a quick legislative update because a bunch of crap happened this week that was important because we blogged about it. And there's always plenty of important things, but we don't always blog about them because there's only so many hours in the day. But we want to get to that stuff, and then we'll dig into the details, the gears, the roots, the oil, the whatever you want to do at 9:30. And we can even talk about the Titanic if you want.
Am I back on?
You are.
Yeah.
I heard you bump your cup into your microphone. All right, so good morning, Max. Some things happened at the State House this week. We had a vote on casinos. We had a what's the other one that was big that we wrote about? SB 116. Vote on Vermont carry or
SB 30
licenseless
still.
carry. SB 30 still lingering in the woods.
It's coming up Wednesday.
So,
unfortunately, the House Finance Committee, I testified against this. They heard 4 hours of testimony. The first 3 hours was elected officials from the North Country, from Coast County, coming down and saying, we need this, we have all our young people, they need jobs, they're all going to the southern part of the state or leaving the state, and we want to have them stick around and work at the Abbey.
Menial jobs in balsams.
Right. And they won't all be minimum wage jobs. That's what they were saying. We want to have them around. 1,700 jobs, they said, but they're mostly low-end service sector jobs. So I testified very briefly on the bill.
that was the wrong microphone.
So I testified briefly on the bill, and I said, we've got. I looked at the actual figures. It's $2.619 billion in taxpayer-funded guaranteed state debt.
Billion or million?
Billion.
Billion?
Over $2,000 for every man, woman, and child in the state. And our bond rating has dropped. We're down to AA1 according to Moody's, and I think one of the others also has us down a notch. And if they take on another $28 million, now they're talking $30 million in debt for the balsams, which would allow the Business Finance Authority to expand yet again, then that's one more chink in the armor.
So to be clear, that $2 billion in debt is total debt for the state, and what you're saying is we can't afford to pile any more on because we don't have the income.
Correct. We don't have the debt-to-income ratio. And it would be like somebody who's already, we're about average for bond rating, we're about average for debt. Mm-hmm. But we have a lot of other liabilities. We have the unfunded pension fund liability, where we're hearing estimates ranging from $4 billion to $14 billion. And we don't know how that's going to pan out. That depends on what the economy is doing. But our bond rating is important because we pay many tens of millions of dollars a year in interest on that debt. It's almost $100 million a year. So just a very slight change in the bond rating increases our interest rate. And if that interest rate goes up, then that's going to be many, many millions of dollars that are going to have to be pulled out of the budget to pay for that. So the problem is, even if the balsams bailout works out just fine, passing it would send a strong indicator to Wall Street, to the bond market, that, hey, New Hampshire has become one of those states again that likes to bail out private projects. Well, now they're talking about all the other private projects like Business Express and the Wentworth. Business Express was that air shuttle service that went out of business filed for Chapter 11 in 1996 and went out of business shortly thereafter, leaving the state with $15 million in loan guarantees on our books and no way to pay it off. So we're still stuck with all that debt. All of these loan guarantees, they don't all get paid off. A lot of them just sit there on our state debt and just continue year after year, and we have to pay the interest on all of it.
Yeah, and that's like co-sponsoring or co-signing a loan for your kid's vehicle, and then the kid does a runner. You're still liable. If they're not responsible, sorry, you still are.
Right.
And here's a perfect example of corporate welfare, that which the Democrats especially, but the Republicans to a smaller degree, have all wailed against. But here again, folks, all corporate welfare is bad unless we're actually attached to it.
And the House Finance Committee voted 22-0 ought to pass. And the only reason they couldn't consent calendar it, well, I guess they don't want to be reelected, because the public comments online are overwhelmingly against this. This is viewed as crony capitalism or crony socialism. It's viewed as a payoff. It's, it would be one thing if it were, Uber or some type of low-cost van pool service for poor or elderly, but this is for the rich. The Balsams is not for your average workaday person. The Balsams is intended to be luxurious, extravagant. It's meant to be the Titanic. It's meant to be, replete with
butlers,
exactly,
and
servants
maids.
And maids, and housekeeping service, and nothing but 5-star extravagance everywhere. And yet, the ordinary blue-collar workers of New Hampshire are going to have to pay to subsidize this big project that's already gone under. And the argument is, well, wait a minute, it went under last time for a reason. It's because it's way the hell out nowhere. It's the only thing connecting it. There's no airport, there's no seaport, there's no connection except for a simple, broken up, frost-heave, 2-lane road, and nothing's been done about the problems that led to its downfall the first time.
How far off a major highway actually is it, Max?
I don't know. I've never been up there. Most New Hampshireites have never been up there. Most New Englanders have never been up there.
Steve, I thought your post was great, equating the Balsams with the current state of public housing. Well, all those pictures.
We're going to have Greg Kline on later, and one of his co-writers, Brian Griffiths, was making some important connections between, the fact that Baltimore had been run by Democrats for 50, 60 years without any Republican influence at all, and how all the investments in the city that they had been made in places where it wasn't beneficial to the people who were rioting right now, who were complaining or were claiming to complain about certain economic conditions. And their part of the city is being destroyed. They're destroying it themselves. And there's probably not, the Democrats and the people with the money and the cronies aren't going to invest that. They're not going to invest in that part of the city. It's this attitude that the crony capitalism. This is another example of that. This is, he says tax increment financing, TIFs see the city actually float bonds for private businesses to build things and hope that the property taxes make up for the bonds later. Just as one example. He has other examples in there. But they're spending this money. They're making tax deals. They're accumulating debt. For what? They're not helping people who really need it. And then you talk about needing to help these people, the same people. Oh, they need help. They need this. They need that. So we're talking about the Balsams. I'm thinking, all right, so you put $28-30 million into the Balsams. Now you're going to say, well, nobody can get there. We should taxpayer back an airport or a road or commuter rail. And where does this take us? It doesn't take us anywhere. We spend another couple $100 million to bring people to a place nobody was going to go to in the first place that we're still paying for.
Right. And let's face it, you're not going to get people to go to a 5-star place that's too far out of the way, unless it's a relatively low-cost 5-star place to stay at. And yet, you're expecting to employ these local Americans at reasonable living wages to staff the place in what you described there, Max, basically overstaff the place to have flashy flunkies everywhere, as the saying goes. And You don't see that anymore. The only place you see that is places like communist China, where the hotels have more people standing around in uniform looking flashy than you can shake a stick at, precisely because they're paid next to nothing.
And let's say...
And they're on the government payroll anyway.
Let's say they build the Balsams and turn it into this shiny gem in the middle of nowhere, right? What are those same Democrats going to do? Those same progressives are going to say, look at the wealth inequality we just paid for with your taxpayer dollars. And then maybe if they could, if we were in Baltimore, they'd start a riot.
Yeah, wait till the minimum wage people come up here and start saying, all those locals at the Balsams now, you need to pay them $15 an hour. Yeah,
That's right.
This is going to be a economic project for the academics forever.
The same people are talking about raising the minimum wage to $14.25 an hour or $16 an hour, and now they're talking about creating some $7.25 an hour jobs, a lot of minimum wage jobs. Which is it going to be? Are you for $7.25 an hour jobs, or are you against them?
Well, you're already seeing in California where they've raised the rates. You also see in Seattle where they raised the minimum wages. Businesses are doing exactly what a lot of us said. They're either shutting down or they're moving somewhere else, period.
Or they're automating where possible.
Well, let me give you a story. I just went to Applebee's for the first time in a long time. I like the place. We just haven't been there. Well, guess what's on the table in every single table at Applebee's in Tilton, New Hampshire?
Automated ordering
You've
kiosk?
got a little automated, well, part of it is for games. They haven't gone full bore yet. I think they're just trying to slide it in. But if I wanted to get an additional drink, if I wanted to buy an appetizer, if I wanted to buy a dessert, I could order it from this little tablet. And the waitress was very happy to show me how to use it. Because, at their current staffing, I think it made life a lot easier, which also meant that they don't have to hire additional people to make her life easier that way. And at Applebee's, like a lot of restaurants, it's not your waitress that brings out your
somebody
food.
else's waitress.
It's somebody else.
So the average restaurant, I did some research on the minimum wage law. The average restaurant in America makes gross about $1.1 million a year. The owner, in net profits, makes about $82,000 a year.
Yeah.
So what's their payroll? Well, the payroll for a fast food, low-service restaurant is only $250,000 a year, but for a high-service waiter, waitress, take care of your order, bring your check, $350,000 a year for the same restaurant. So the difference, in effect, between having all the additional wait staff, waiter, waitresses, is about $100,000 a year in payroll. So they're really working to do that, to try to save themselves about $100,000 a year if they can.
Yeah.
Minimize their...
Right. The waitresses can be around a little bit less often and just smile sweetly. The bus kids can run out with the glasses of water and the food from the kitchen. And the rest of it, you can do self-service.
So you have 5 people on staff instead of 7.
All right, we'll be right back. Oh, lower insurance costs, too, while we're at it. Huh? More
Obamacare.
details. We're going to get into the weeds on some other stuff. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
When asked whether she still supports Obamacare, Senator Jeanne Shaheen said,
"Yes, I do continue to support the law. We're beginning to see some positive results."
How can Senator Shaheen say we're seeing positive results when 22,000 of our neighbors have already lost their health insurance? What's worse, the Boston Globe reports the state's only health insurance provider radically reduced the number of hospitals in their network, forcing some people to drive over an hour for lab work, even when there's a hospital within a few miles of their home. When pressed about lack of access, Shaheen said,
"There are some hospitals that are not covered, unfortunately, and I certainly hope that's going to change."
Jeanne Shaheen promised us we could keep our doctors and our healthcare coverage. Now she hopes we can get to a local hospital? Call Senator Shaheen at 603-647-7500. Tell her we need more than hope. We need leadership. Paid for by Citizens for a Strong New Hampshire.
Hi, this is Rich Gerard, host of Gerard at Large in the Morning, the Manchester area's only locally owned, locally operated, focused, and interested, riveting radio show, heard live every Monday through Friday from 6 to 9 on 90.7 FM WLMW, New Hampshire Family Radio, and available 24/7 live or archived at GerardAtLarge.com. Be sure to tune in.
This is a coalition of New Hampshire taxpayers. We're located at 8 North Main in Concord, New Hampshire. This is the repository for all things conservative and municipal. So if you have a problem in your town, your school, your budget committee, the right to know law, and now at the top of our list is voter fraud. You have a tip for us, some information for us, you want to join or help us out, cnht.org.
Hi, this is Rich Gerard, host of Gerard at Large in the Morning. You're listening to Grok Talk.
3, 2, 1.
We'd like to welcome you to another edition of Grok Talk, brought to you by New Hampshire's leading conservative blog site, GraniteGrok.com. We are your feared extremist, right-wing, hard-charging, gun-toting, opinionated, outspoken, rabble-rousing, letter-writing, radio microphone stomping conservatives and rational libertarians. So get ready for more news and opinion you could only get from GraniteGrok.com.
Grok Talk.
At the end of the show, the last 15 minutes, we'll do our Whiskey Tango Foxtrot. We've got a couple of good potential winners this week, one of whom is Jennifer Horn.
Chair of the New Hampshire GOP.
Of the New Hampshire GOP. So stay tuned for that. We're here with Max. We're going to do some more legislative stuff, talk about not just the legislation in New Hampshire, but, of course, the culture, the politics, and a lot of this stuff affects your states and your national government, too, because the people who do this crazy stuff, they're in government everywhere. So don't forget to check us out on Stitcher, iTunes, Spreaker, iHeart, TuneIn, all your mobile devices. You can get us. We are streaming live on Spreaker right now and also on Ustream.
And at Granite Rock.
And at Granite Rock. And you can get audio versions and video versions on YouTube. Actually, if you go to my YouTube channel, Spreaker automatically pops up a copy of every episode that I post to Steve McDonald's YouTube, whether I want it or not. But it's there. If you go to my page, it's like this. It's all these blue Spreaker audio-only things. It's crazy. Or you can just listen at Spreaker. Don't even bother going there.
And you can go to the Granite Rock YouTube channel.
You can absolutely. There's tons of video there. Tons.
Almost 2,500 videos.
So
with all just about 1 million views.
So go check it out. And, Facebook and Twitter, Granite Rock. Just look for Granite Rock. Like us, share us, do all that good stuff. All right, so what else did we have besides the balsams? I mentioned a couple things, and we just sort of ended up stuck on the ball. We always get stuck on the balsams. Let's move on to something else.
Because it's a boondoggle, it's some of the worst of government, but we did actually get a good bill to pass through the legislature this week.
And we killed a bad bill. Well, I thought it was bad, but
so go
please
for it.
Proceed, sir.
Before I forget, we did overturn one committee recommendation. That was on SB 252. That was simply establishing a committee to study a number plate commemorating Laconia Motorcycle Week.
Oh, right. Yeah.
So the Transportation Committee blew that out of the water 13-2. Well, a couple of members of that committee didn't agree with that decision. So they went to the floor and they fought it and they argued it. And people said, well, what's wrong with establishing a committee for Laconia for Motorcycle Week? What's wrong with that? So we overruled them. We overruled them by a pretty good margin. And I think now it's set in that committee recommendations are just recommendations. Judiciary Committee carries a lot of weight. Judiciary Committee recommended unanimously SB 243, which was a bill that essentially, as I read it, allowed a town manager who wants to cover everything up, protect everything from the right to know law, to simply file some bogus paperwork and say, oh, we're going to sue somebody. All they have to do is have anything in writing
from
filed.
the town lawyer. Yes, I remember this.
But it doesn't even have to come from the town lawyer. It could just be the town manager grabbing his little scratch pad and saying, I'm going to sue somebody. And as long as there's something listed in writing, he doesn't have to list a cause of action, any facts, any details, or even who he's suing, and say, well, we're threatening legal action. And that's it. And they can cover up everything. Now, in Seabrook, we had a town manager, not the current one, but a previous town manager who took a $500,000 contract for mold remediation at the town hall. It was a disaster. Everyone was upset and up in arms about it. And he took the $500,000 and he gave it to a contractor he knew in Massachusetts. They came up, they did the work. It was not put up for competitive bid, and he said, "Oh, it was all legal." So people exercised their right to know. They asked for the information. Where did it go? Why wasn't this put up for competitive bid? And we got no answers from him. So now, to cover that kind of thing up, all he has to do is threaten to sue anyone. He could even threaten to sue the contractor as part of a little deal, and he could cover everything up, and only the selectmen would know about it. So there are a lot of bills like that going through. That one unfortunately passed, but at least there was a floor fight on it. We got 100 and some votes against it. And judiciary has made a number of other attempts to curtail right to know. Of course, there was the famous one where they wanted to charge so many, minimum wage times however many hours they said to recover records, and finally they knew that they were going to get their butts kicked, and they didn't want judiciary to look bad, so they tabled their own bill because they knew it was very, very unpopular, and the press was covering that one.
We talked about it a lot. The regular media did. That bill was ridiculous.
I think members of the Judiciary Committee are going to have a hard time getting reelected. They don't have any support from within the party now. We're looking at the things that they're doing, and we're seeing the votes 16-0, 17-0, 17-0. They're voting unanimously, and then we're looking at the bills and we're saying, how did that get any votes, except for maybe from the Democrats? How is that getting any votes? You want to cover up this expense. You want towns and cities to be able to cover up no
Aaron
bid
Day, if you're
contracts.
listening, judiciary list primary.
Absolutely. And it is the case where you keep wondering, we may talk about this later on, but, the NHGOP committee man, committee woman, obviously and blatantly activating themselves in defiance of the NHGOP platform. And we just keep seeing this over and over and over again, where why are we electing Republicans when it's not so much that they won't support what the platform says, but they're actively egging people on to do the exact opposite. Bergeron signing on for gay marriage at the Supreme Court, and now it came out, I have to hand it to Pindell of the Boston Globe, late of WMUR, exposing Steve Dupree as being for abortion. And he's supposed to be representative of the grassroots of the Republican Party.
We did oppose both of them in their elections.
And God bless her heart, and I mean that truly. I think that, Susan Olsen put up a post on Jennifer Horn as well. We'll talk about that as well, but I'm going to have to write about Mr. Dupree.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, wasn't there something about Medicaid expansion also? I thought there was something.
We've been going against that. That's been my favorite hobby horse, but that's time for another
the state
time.
party was all in on that. It was a state senate thing. Anyway, let's not get too far off the
Okay.
No. So we dealt with that one.
My apologies.
And so the Judiciary Committee basically is operating in lockstep under the Jasper Shurtleff regime.
Pretty much.
We need to make them, this comes down to our training, guys, we need to make them more afraid of the voters than they are of the Democrats.
Well, they don't realize it. In the Seacoast, at least, when we vote on something and it's roll called, it's published in the paper. The next day, or sometimes the same day, people find out in our district. They find out online. They know within hours of me pushing that button, they know how I voted. They know how my other reps have voted and whether or not they voted. They know that I vote 99% of the time. They know that other reps are missing half their votes. They know that some people aren't showing up at all.
Yeah, and Laconia Daily Sun, thanks to Mike Kitch, to whom I often have a lot of arguments in this long simmering war, but he does put up a lot of the votes, especially for those pieces of legislation that are of consequence. Either that or he's just trying to poke a stick, one of the two. But, and I think it's healthy to have those votes put out there and hung out to dry. We just need to hang some of those legislators with those votes out to dry as well.
All right, so casino died.
That was a long, long debate. I waited in the anteroom through most of the debate. They aired the debate over speakers throughout the State House, so you can go all around the State House and still listen to the debate. In fact, I went out to get ice cream, and we were still talking about casinos. Ben & Jerry's was giving away free ice cream. I believe the Auto Dealers Association had an event going on. They had cars out there being demoed. They were just parked, and they had their hoods up like they were selling them to...
No free samples, huh?
No, but we did get free samples of ice cream. The ice cream, I'll say, was terrific. But a lot of legislators got sick. And I haven't found out yet whether or not there's a correlation. I got sick, very sick. I haven't figured out if there's a correlation.
It's not Bluebell ice cream, is it?
That's because Ben and Jerry support the death tax. That's why. Wrote about that this week. Anyway, so while they were making people sick during the casino vote, are they pro-casino? I wonder. Anyway.
The most esteemed wife actually took her iPad and she was listening to that debate. I've never seen her do that before. She just wanted to know what was going on.
Well, there was a lot of buzz in the press about how this might be the year we get a casino.
Well, but we went into it thinking it was already 20 to 30 votes behind, and it was the same arguments for and against over and over and over and over and over. And so that 1 hour debate, you tune in and you listen to it, and it's the same arguments for and against.
Don't they try to have like a policy where you don't just come up and make the same argument if somebody already made it?
So wasn't there an attempt, Max, to actually make it different this time? I mean, the proposal comes up and it goes around and around, and essentially it's a crony capitalist license by the state in the to try and get some tax money, and it has to be. Basically, it's cronies of the governor or some legislators that want to open this casino. And didn't we try and make it different this time and actually say, if you're going to have casinos, just allow casinos and let the tax chips fall where they may?
Oh, yeah, JR had an amendment, right? Was it JR?
Yes, he did. It actually stunned people. It went over 100 votes, and it was just get rid of RSA 647 Section 2. Effectively, legalize most forms of gaming in the state. And Rogers, who's for casinos, Democrat from Concord, I think.
Yep.
Mm.
She's the one with the white hair, and she has the pink and blue, dark blue streak in her hair. She went up and spoke against it, and she said, well, children will be able to gamble under this bill. And I was thinking about that. Oh, we don't want children gambling. And I thought, well, teenagers are already gambling as it is, so they're just doing it illegally. There's no possible way you can enforce something like that.
At this point, the way that Maggie Hassan wanted her casino set up, one heavily regulated casino. It's like, why not just make it part of state government? Because effectively, that's what it's going to be if it's that heavily regulated.
Well,
because
then it would lose money.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, the definition of fascism, if you look back to Benito Mussolini, was they realized that unlike the Germans, they didn't have to own everything. You just had to so heavily regulate it, the state ends up with essentially control of that privately held company anyways. And that's effectively what they're trying to do.
Yeah, and that's also similar to what happens in heavily socialist countries where the government and the unions and every other interested party but the people who are tasked with making a profit actually end up on the board of the entity.
So this is part of the reason that SB 113 failed.
Talking about casinos, and now they're talking about fascism.
House Bill 630 is a free market version of that, and people who were on the fence found out about HB 630. HB 630 would lower your property taxes by roughly, if everything worked out properly, roughly $400 per year. The state's share of the property taxes is about $250 per thousand. Is set to be equal to be $363 million a year in revenue taken in. If HB 630 passed, we would take in about $227 million, which would go to buy that property tax rate down. People looked at HB 630 and said, that's a much better deal. The reason is SB 113, which we killed on Wednesday, would have saved you maybe $20 a year on property taxes, if anything.
Wait a minute. I'm looking at the tax rates here. And SB 113, the original one, was between 35 and 18% for tax rates. But underneath the Republican one, a tax rate of 67%, it's like it confirms what I was saying. Basically, we're going to just let private runnership of a state-owned entity.
But
67, 2/3 of what comes in.
True, but This 67% right now is 100%. In other words, it's not allowed at all. This would allow, in effect, slot machines to go in anywhere you've got a liquor license, any liquor store, any bar. So at least this would be an expansion of freedom. The other thing is the revenue coming in from this would pay down the property tax rate. That's the benefit. You wouldn't have gotten that from. You wouldn't have gotten that right. Exactly.
Right, we're gonna take 60 seconds. We'll be right back. Hang on.
This is the Coalition of New Hampshire Taxpayers. We're located at 8 North Main in Concord, New Hampshire. This is the repository for all things conservative and municipal. So if you have a problem in your town, your school, your budget committee, the right to know law, and now at the top of our list is voter fraud. You have a tip for us, some information for us, you want to join or help us out, cnht.org.
Hi, this is Rich Gerard, host of Gerard at Large in the Morning, the Manchester area's only locally owned, locally operated, focused, and interested riveting radio show, heard live every Monday through Friday from 6 to 9 on 90.7 FM WLMW New Hampshire Family Radio, and available 24/7 live or archived at gerardatlarge.com. Be sure to tune in.
Yes. I always have to say something like it's the Casino Blues or something like that. Welcome back to Grok Talk. Facebook and Twitter, we are there. So should you be. You probably are on Facebook and Twitter, but you could be following us as well. We would like you to do that. We're talking about legislation and stuff and junk and things on Grok Talk.
You're so melodramatic this morning.
Thank you. Melodramatic. It's the jazz, man. It's mellow. All right. So anyway.
So I took a lot of criticism for voting against the casino bill, but other reps from my district, Andrew Christie among them, voted against casinos, and a lot of other, most of the state house. We looked at the legislation, we heard the debate, many of us read the bill, and those who read the bill, who weren't from Salem, voted against it. We had platform Republicans, we had establishment Republicans, we had Democrats. Majorities of all three groups voted it down, and there were strong arguments against it, and it was out of state. There's the not my what is it, not made here concern. A lot of people voted against it because it would have just been money taken out of the state, sent to owners in Nevada, California, China, and Singapore. But the biggest thing that hurt it with Republicans was that this would have been, one, a state-protected monopoly or duopoly, and secondly, the people who would be deciding which two locations got it were all picked by, either the president of the Senate or the governor, and it would have just been it would have been just another backroom deal where they decide whether or not a second mini casino goes in, where it goes in, and they have absolute discretion about whether or not to put in a second casino. So, SB 113 was a terrible bill, and when we looked at, I vote with my district, when I looked at the effect on my district, there was very little benefit, and there was a lot of harm. Once Millennium comes in, they wanted a state-protected monopoly, and they would want to do away with all other competition, even charitable gaming, even small businesses. If somebody else wanted to put up another casino, they would have fought it tooth and nail and killed it.
This sounds just like the same kind of deal, albeit a little bit differently, but the same principle of the medical con board, construction, certification of need. You've got all these medical facilities all on the board determining, well, do we need another competitor or not? And I think that's one of the things where government is used as a blunt club to keep competitors out. And essentially what they're doing with this casino bill, which is another reason why I am against it, is that if you're going to allow casino gambling, then allow casino gambling. If somebody wants to take their own money, put it in. I wonder how long it would be before the Balsams wants gambling.
They don't want it. We offered it to them. They said, Nope, we want the $28 million bailout.
Yeah.
We offered tax credits, tax abatements, you name it. They said, nope,
Yeah.
we want the $28 million loan guarantee.
But if you're going to allow it, let anybody with their own money set up their own gaming operation. Yeah, it has to be watched, unfortunately. But why make it a monopoly? And why so heavily regulate it, like I said before, as to be nothing more than just a revenue stream for government? Because the last thing we need is more government flunkies all over the place. They're always crying about we don't have enough money for this, money for that. Get back and do the hard job of actually, if you say the roads and bridges are a priority, then you have to stop spending on other stuff, concentrate on the roads and bridges. Just don't say, how else are we going to fleece the taxpayers to do more stuff? And if you've noticed, they're not spending any more on it anyways, but it's a great thing to flog.
Biggest complaint about the toll booths is that the money coming in goes right into the general fund. About a third of it is eaten up by Judiciary and by Health and Human Services. People hate that. Well, I sat down and I figured out how much toll booths bring in because I had a floor amendment on SB 113. In effect, take some of the gambling revenue, some of the casino revenue, and displace that, use that to do away with the toll booths. So I had to figure out how much money the toll booths were bringing in net. They're losing money. In 2012, we lost over $9 million just on collection costs and administrative costs and the other costs associated with toll booths and Easy Pass. In 2014, our net revenue was $44.6 million. However, when you sit down and look at all the other costs for mitigation fees, fees that have to be paid to towns, increased number of car accidents, the increased traffic congestion from cars going onto the roads, the need to then buy up rights-of-way and expand the roads, and then the need to the loss of revenue from businesses that are along Route 1, Route 3, and other surface roads that are near all these toll booths, we actually lose revenue. There's less money in the general fund because we have toll booths. We would actually be better off just getting rid of the toll booths altogether. So not only are toll booths causing accidents and getting people injured and getting people killed, worst of all, we're paying to subsidize them. So people say, well, what would you do with the lost revenue? You don't do anything with the lost revenue. We'd actually have more revenue altogether. We'd save more money. Then there's no reason to have toll booths. We should just do away with them. However, Jasper said, oh, that's non-germane, so he wouldn't allow a floor debate. And
isn't that why the toll booths were removed along the 95 corridor in Connecticut? They were costing more than they were generating?
I think that's part of the reason. The other reason is they were sued in court, in federal court, and I think it was the U.S. Supreme Court even. It was either the First District or it was the U.S. Supreme Court that said, once you have the bonds paid off, once the bonds are paid off, if you assess a toll in order to pay off bonds, once the bonds are paid off, you can no longer keep the toll booths up. Well, the bonds for the I-95 and the Everett Turnpike and whatnot, they were paid off decades ago. So why do we still have toll booths in place? We're flying in violation of the law. All anyone would have to do is go down to the Superior Court and file some paperwork and get a court order to have the toll booths taken down.
Same reason why the Mass Turnpike still has its toll booths up, because they did pay off the bonds and they were still collecting the tolls.
New York State Thruway, probably New Jersey, probably every turnpike and highway system in the country.
Yeah, well, Massachusetts then, hearing this rumbling that, well, now we've paid them off, we need to get rid of them, the toll booths, well, they went and issued new bonds against them.
That's what you do when you're in a government.
And that's what New Hampshire is doing. They floated, a couple of years ago, they floated millions of dollars in new bonds just to keep the toll booths up. And they're only paying $15 million a year on the bonds. They're collecting $119.3 million a year on toll booths, and the justification is for $15 million a year in bond payments.
That's interesting.
It's interesting and it's corrupt. And, of course, the big one was SB 116, Vermont Carry. Actually, it's probably the smallest gun rights bill that we've ever passed. All it does is say, during that 14-day waiting period while you're waiting for the police chief to send you your pistol revolver license back, if you already have a lawful right to openly carry, now you can put your jacket on. Under current law, for 14 days while you're waiting on that, you already have a lawful right to openly carry a firearm. However, You have to wait until that permit shows up before you can put your jacket on or put your gun in your purse. That's all it did. So these gun grabbers have made a tremendous deal about it. We've received, as state representatives, I've never received so many emails in my life, probably 50 or 60 emails just like this that were just form letters. There were a few that were handwritten. Somebody came up with something. But this woman took her form letter and she added something a little bit different. She added a little statement in there. And the question is, what if an officer is called to investigate a dispute and they encounter an unstable, and here's her comment, almost always conservative, crazy, and angry white male, and that many has a concealed weapon that he did not have to get a permit for. So she sent this out to HREPs. She sent it out to all of our legislators.
That sounds more or less illiterate.
Yes.
If you're reading that verbatim.
And racist.
Well, of course. So, I had some points to make on the concealed carry, because you notice the Democrats always.
But I've got to make this point.
Go on.
This isn't just from some random person from Portsmouth or Newmarket. This came from Sarah Brown, who is the director of Green Alliance. So she didn't just happen to be the director of Green Alliance. She sent it from her Green Alliance account, and I don't have the other email with me, but it has has the logo. She used her official email, so she's using the greenalliance.biz website, server, hardware, all of the officialdom to fight against Vermont carry.
Good. Then we need to post that and to make it very clear that the Green Alliance is unconstitutional and is working against our rights. And we know this because their director said so in writing.
And if you care about gun rights, don't shop at any store that is a member of the Green Alliance. Boycott the Green Alliance.
Right. So, I wrote these little comments. I thought they were kind of fun. Because the Democrats always come out against self-defense, against constitutional carry.
60 seconds.
Okay, let me be quick. Let me be loud and clear. Democrats are the party of the government plantation. Democrats are the party of institutionalized racism. Democrats are the party of the war on women. And let's really hurt them. Democrats are the party of the patriarchy, the old white men. Sheets Byrd, D. KKK. Ted Kennedy, D. Chappaquiddick. Harry Reid, D. Landdeal. Joe Biden, D. Groper. But most of all, Democrats are the party of the patriarchy because they want to make women more convenient. Contraception for all, abortion for all, and no self-defense at all. What do you think they meant by free love? Who, again, are the predators? Arm the women, especially the moms, i.e. Baltimore. Ba-boom.
Hey, you fit it all in there.
That's great.
Very good. Coming up, Greg Kline, Red, Maryland. We're going to be doing our little segment break here, going on our way. Mac, thanks for coming in. I know there's about 100 things we didn't get to, but,
I think that was all of them.
Oh, really?
I think that was all of them right there.
Wow.
Maggie's vetoing the bill, though. She said so.
Of course she is.
Well,
of course she is.
She doesn't want to get elected to the Senate. That's fine.
Well, we'll see what pressure we can bring to bear to make it as inconvenient as possible. But until that time, we'll be right back with Greg Kline to talk about the riots in Baltimore. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Senator Jeanne Shaheen said, if you like your current health plan, you can keep it. That's not true, Senator. 22,000 New Hampshire citizens have been kicked off their insurance plans. Hospitals in Rochester, Concord, and Portsmouth, they aren't allowed to provide care under the exchange. Senator, you were wrong in your comments. You should apologize for your misleading remarks. I'm calling Senator Shaheen at 750-3004 and telling her I want my doctor back. You should too.
Paid for by saberpac.org, not authorized by any candidate or candidate committee.
We are struggling. Rising healthcare costs are part of the problem. Senator Jeanne Shaheen helped create this mess we're in. As a state senator, her bill chased 21 insurers out of our state. It reduced our choices, raised prices for New Hampshire families, and when Jeanne Shaheen supported Obamacare, it limited access to 10 of our 26 hospitals, reducing our choices again. Tell Jeanne Shaheen she's made healthcare worse. Few things are as important as finding the right doctor. And under Obamacare, that's harder than ever. Over a third of our hospitals no longer available. Our doctors no longer covered. Fewer choices, longer drives. No state has been harder hit than us. And even after watching it impact New Hampshire, Congresswoman Ann Custer still supports it. Call Ann Custer. Tell her Obamacare isn't working for New Hampshire.
This is the Coalition of New Hampshire Taxpayers. We're located at 8 North Main in Concord, New Hampshire. This is the repository for all things conservative and municipal. So if you have a problem in your town, your school, your budget committee, the right to know law, and now at the top of our list is voter fraud. You have a tip for us, some information for us, you want to join or help us out, cnht.org.
Three, two, one.
We'd like to welcome you to another edition of Grok Talk, brought to you by New Hampshire's leading conservative blog site, GraniteGrok.com. We are your feared, extremist, right-wing, hard-charging, gun-toting, opinionated, outspoken, rabble-rousing, letter-writing, radio microphone stomping conservatives and rational libertarians. So get ready for more news and opinion you could only get from GraniteGrok.com.
Grok Talk.
You missed the stuff that happens on the break. They were having a nice discussion about HP and technology, and we're not going to go there right now, maybe at the end of the show. But this is Grok Talk. Welcome back, coming to you live and pre-recorded later in the week from the beautiful CNHT studios in Concord, New Hampshire. Always a pleasure to be here. A little cold this morning. It's warming up, though. It's been kind of nice the last week, so not as bad as it's been. And that's a good thing because it's been kind of lousy weather up here, but we're not here to talk about the weather. That's coming up in segment 4. In the meantime, what we'd like to do is bring on Greg Kline from Red, Maryland. So we needed a voice from the state who is on the ground and near the riots in Baltimore. And this is our guy. We've had him on the show before. Greg, good morning.
Good morning. How are you guys?
Good. How are you?
Good.
Good. Well,
watching in horror. So let's hear the reality from the ground, as it were.
There's a lot.
All right, where do you guys want to start?
Well, you know, that's a good question, and I've been thinking about it for 2 or 3 days now because there's so many things we could talk about. You know, the city systemics, the police force, the Dem lock on power, corruption, incompetence, what sparked it, Freddie Gray, the injuries, the outside provocateurs, the 180-degree change in evidence, the overcharging by the prosecutor. I honestly don't know where to start, so I'm kind of hoping you can help us out.
And David Clark's always sanguine opinions.
So give us yours. I mean, you're there. You're in Maryland. You know,
right.
You know people in politics and in the city and the governor and everything. What would you be writing about with regard to this situation?
Well, I'll tell you, one of the things I'm writing about right now that we'll have up at Red, Maryland this afternoon is some thoughts on these indictments that came out. And you guys, even in that little intro, I think kind of touched on something that I think is on our side of things we need to be a little bit careful about. I think there's been this knee-jerk reaction by conservatives with these indictments coming out against the police that somehow this is entirely politically motivated, that these are baseless charges against good cops, and that everything's being overcharged. You got to be careful about that, guys. There's no question that there's political motivation here. There's no question that our Baltimore City State's Attorney, and I saw one national commentator refer to it as the Maryland State's Attorney. The prosecutor represents the city of Baltimore, and she was just recently elected. It's not the entire state. In fact, our Maryland Attorney General has refused to get involved in the case and do his own investigation. That's another subject. Some of the reporting that had been going on even this week that somehow Mr. Gray had inflicted these injuries on himself, that's kind of been debunked. In fact, the source of that story from a local D.C. television station was interviewed in Baltimore and disputed that account and he was the only guy who was in the paddy wagon with the guy. The other thing is there's been this kind of internet rumor, really has been completely debunked, that Mr. Gray was involved in some sort of previous injury suit where he had serious spinal cord injuries. That's been completely debunked. But it's still making the rounds and people are relying on it. Look, guys, this isn't like Ferguson or the Eric Garner case where you had somebody who was actively resisting arrest and the police had to take action that resulted in the guy's death, either by using force in self-defense or someone was injured as a result of actively resisting arrest. This was a guy who was in police custody. He was secured in a police vehicle and suffered injuries during that period of time. Now, what exactly happened is disputed, and there's not a whole lot that's known about it. But it's pretty clear that it's very possible that these police officers, and there is a history of this in Baltimore City, we shouldn't be blinded to this fact, of giving, defendants rough rides and things like that. And the fact is this guy was arrested. You can argue whether he was resisting police by running away and certainly this guy has a criminal record. There's no question about that. But the state's attorney basically made the determination there wasn't probable cause even to arrest him in the first place. That's probably going to be one of the hottest factual disputes, but he wasn't actively engaged in a crime at the time he was arrested. So I'd be a little leery before we start talking about 180 degrees turns on the evidence and overcharging. There may be some overcharging, and the process will certainly play out. But we've got bad cops in Baltimore City and have for a long time, which brings me back to kind of the one of the most interesting things about this entire ordeal is that's extraordinary. And I think, this is something you guys have probably been talking about as well. This week we've had the mayor of Baltimore, and of course, Al Sharpton's come to town to make things a lot worse, trying to blame... you had this extraordinary statement from Al Sharpton defending the mayor of Baltimore City, saying that it's not her fault. These things have been going on for decades. And I'm thinking, well, that's probably true, but there hasn't been a Republican mayor in the city of Baltimore since 1968, and there hasn't been a Republican elected to a city office there in city council since 1939. And we've only had, 5 years that we've had a Republican governor in the state of Maryland during that time as well. So Al Sharpton has to be blaming the Maryland Democratic Party for
and especially O'Malley, who's been both mayor and governor.
Well, and that's true. And the biggest victim in this has clearly been Martin O'Malley, because he cut short a money-making trip to Ireland to come back, and when he came back and gave speeches, he got tough questions, which he's not used to getting asked, which he wasn't asked when he was governor, frankly. And he got heckled in Baltimore City. Even David Simon, the producer of The Wire, who still says he would vote for him, by the way, so don't lose sight of that, came out and basically blamed all of this on Martin O'Malley and his mass arrest policies.
Well, those policies have largely worked. They worked in New York under Giuliani, and I think they helped Baltimore a little bit. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't treat the arrestees well. You still have to properly secure them and not beat them up. And who the heck knows what? One of the pieces of the story is, as part of the ride, he was not secured and may have been thrashing himself around, but. Well, yeah, that's only half the story. I know. I know that there was some. I'd be careful about equating what Martin O'Malley did exactly. I know there's some similarities, and they brought some. Ed Norris from New York City. We're not talking about broken glass policing here, broken window policing, which I agree with you is very effective. This was as much a case of just Martin O'Malley had a public policy to just arrest people. And if he just arrested people and took them off the streets, then that was going to reduce things. Most of them were never charged with anything. That's a little different than, focusing on petty crimes and quality of life crimes, which was done in New York City. That makes a whole lot of sense. And of course, the current mayor has exactly the opposite policy, which is let's arrest less people, even if they committed crimes, in the interest of making the statistics look better.
Well, that's part of it. And before all of this happened, Baltimore was back on track this year for 300 murders. So that certainly was the case, and certainly it was very, very lax policing on Saturday and on Monday that led to the widespread destruction and things getting out of control because the police, essentially, whatever the mayor says she said or claims she meant or whatever, the fact is that the police here were very clearly given rules of engagement to allow these rioters to destroy property, and they took full advantage of it and went beyond that.
Yeah, and of course she said it's only property. And the thing is, yeah, it's only property, but it's not her property. These are residents that actually have invested in her city, and it's not her money either. The insurance companies will pay for it. The evil insurance companies. Yeah, right.
Well, that's of course none of that's true. And when you hear some of the stories, like you've probably seen some of the stories about the shoe warehouse that the owner watched for 4 hours on his surveillance cameras this place getting looted, and the police did nothing, not one thing to interdict for 4 hours while this guy's watching his family's business being looted. One of the things that isn't getting widely reported but is reported here is that during the riots, there was a lot of involvement from local drug gangs who are now, at the table trying to make peace, which is just extraordinary. But there are reports that there were gang leaders or gang members who were protecting African-American-owned businesses and directing looters to Asian-owned businesses. And there's no question that Asian-owned businesses were some of the hardest hit and most often looted on Monday.
Yeah, Greg?
And a lot of those folks who've been interviewed and talking to the press, they don't have insurance that's going to replace a lot of this stuff.
Greg, this is Skip.
That's one ugly aspect of this that isn't getting reported either, and kind of undermines, what the mayor is saying is it's just property, because it was a little darker than that.
Yeah, Greg, this is Skip. Doesn't this kind of give lie once again to what Elizabeth Warren, the uber progressive senator from Massachusetts, who in her Warrenism rant said, "You didn't build that. We all helped to build that." And she said, government is the entity that makes it possible for you not to have to hire people to protect your property, talking about business owners. And, we saw that in Ferguson. Now we've seen it here. So, well, gosh, if government can't protect me and my property, what good is it?
Well, that's why you have to protect your own. And, of course,
Yeah,
Baltimore
absolutely.
is one.
And, of course, in the city of Baltimore, they have very strict gun rules, and we do here in Maryland as well. So that was, even though you do have some business owners that were able to do that and take advantage of what limited Second Amendment rights they have. But you know what? There's a dirty little secret. I had people asking me this week. I'm an attorney here in Maryland as well. If the mayor is going to allow this stuff to happen, can these business owners seek redress from the government, from the city?
Ooh.
And the answer is there have been courts that have ruled, this is kind of a dirty little secret, there are courts that have ruled that the government doesn't have an obligation to protect individuals, let alone property.
We've talked about that in New Hampshire a number of times.
The Supreme Court decision where police didn't have to protect the individuals. But, in such an event as what's been happening in Baltimore, that's not just a single individual. That's a whole mess of people. Obviously the CVS store on fire caught national attention. And there's the police just standing there. Wouldn't that be evidence to be able to say you didn't do your job?
Well, but the point is, as the courts have said, they don't have an obligation to stop it. Not one that's actionable anyway. I mean, I think they have a moral and constitutional obligation, but it's not like the CVS Corporation, which, by the way, you saw one on TV burn. There were actually a couple other drugstores in the city that burned at the same time, that weren't live on air while we were watching it. But they're not going to be able to get recovery from the city. Now, that doesn't mean that at the end of the day that government, and probably the state government, is not going to step in and try to fix some of this mess. It's one of the things we've been talking about. Even once this unrest dies down and things return to normal, the cost of this is going to be enormous, and it's going to drive politics here in Maryland for some time.
Greg, we're going to take 60 seconds. Stay on the line. We'll be right back as soon as I push the right button.
This is the Coalition of New Hampshire Taxpayers. We're located at 8 North Main in Concord, New Hampshire. This is the repository for all things conservative and municipal. So if you have a problem in your town, your school, your budget committee, the right to know law, and now, at the top of our list is voter fraud. You have a tip for us, some information for us, you want to join or help us out, cnht.org.
Hi, this is Rich Gerard, host of Gerard at Large in the Morning, the Manchester area's only locally owned, locally operated, focused, and interested, riveting radio show, heard live every Monday through Friday from 6 to 9 on 90.7 FM WLMW, New Hampshire Family Radio, and available 24/7 live or archived at GerardAtLarge.com. Be sure to tune in.
This is Grog Talk. We're talking to Greg Kline from Red, Maryland about the riots in Baltimore, getting good, fresh information from the ground to contradict all the other crazy stuff we've been hearing about. So we've obviously got city politics. We've got, police abuse, possibly. We've got, the media nonsense that always goes on that clouds the reality. At the end of the day, a riot started, and so we should probably try to clear up some other stuff. There's been reports of people from outside coming in to irritate tensions and to make things worse. Of course, Al Sharpton showed up, as you said, which is never a good thing.
No.
What's the reality there?
Well, the reality is there were a lot of reports, and initially on Saturday, the reporting locally, because, of course, that on Saturday night, the national media was more worried about the correspondence dinner than they were about the riots going 40 miles up the road. But the reporting was there were a lot of outside agitators. The reality is, when you look at the police arrest records, the vast majority of the people involved in these were Baltimoreans. There may be people outside agitating, but it's not a big factor. This is homegrown. And I think to some extent that's why you've seen it die down so quickly once the police, and really once the governor of our state stepped in and got the thing under control, that we haven't seen the widespread unrest that we saw before. Because this was homegrown, and you had an inadequate police response, a really failed police response. I mean, I'm sure you guys have seen the video. I mean, Monday afternoon, where you were seeing police officers carried away injured and being pelted with rocks. I mean, it's just extraordinary that the city of Baltimore simply lost control of a big chunk of that city, and as you guys pointed out, watched it burn literally until finally. And this is an important point that I do want to get to, if you guys will let me. Sure. We have a Republican governor here who just got elected in November, and he's done such a fantastic job getting this thing under control, and he's kind of getting some national profile for it. But the Democrats here, and I know Al Sharpton went after him particularly. This Mayor Stephanie Rawlings Blake, who we've been a critic of for a long time at Red, Maryland, is just not used to getting negative press, and she's been really trying to get out from under all the criticism from the way the city handled this. In Maryland, and I don't know if New Hampshire is the same way or not, in order for the governor to bring in the National Guard, one of two things has to happen. Either there has to be a request from a locality, a local jurisdiction, for an emergency declaration, which is what happened here, or the governor would have to unilaterally declare martial law, which hasn't happened here in a long time. The governor was anticipating that emergency declaration was going to be brought by the mayor, but she kept putting it off. The governor, as the governor mentioned on Monday night, the usual response time for the National Guard to get activated is 8 hours. He was planning ahead, and that reaction time was much, much shorter. In fact, he was ready to go once he got asked to come in. And when the mayor finally called and asked for help, he signed an executive order within 30 seconds of that phone call, and the trucks were on the road immediately. There have been some on our side who've been kind of critical of why he didn't unilaterally just go in himself. I think it's pretty obvious from the optics that you've already seen that would have been a mistake.
You know,
but
Harry
more
Truman.
importantly, and this is important to remember for people when they talk, when the mayor of Baltimore asked for an emergency declaration, she did two things that are critical to remember. And I think they explain why she delayed. Number one, incumbent in that request was the mayor of Baltimore had to acknowledge that the mayor and the city of Baltimore, who prior to Monday had state police and outside jurisdictions supporting them, but they still had to admit that their resources were inadequate to deal with the emergency, that they in the city could not handle the emergency. Yeah. So by requesting state aid, they admitted that, number one. And number two, they had to turn over control to the state of Maryland. And in this case, it would have been the state police who would have come in and taken over there, along with the support of other jurisdictions. Yeah. So, you know, while the mayor is trying to, and Commissioner Batts and the city have continued to have press conferences and act like they're running the show, the reality is they admitted failure on Monday, called for state aid, and the state stepped in. And since that time, you haven't seen the unrest that you saw. You haven't seen any rioting. You haven't seen that kind of unrest because the state has been running the show. And the governor, who's been trying very hard not to make this a political issue or not to try to point fingers, even though he's been getting, you know, a lot of criticism from those in the city who are very defensive right now, including Al Sharpton coming into their defense, has done a really masterful job not only managing the situation and dealing with the emergency, but going out to the city and meeting with people and working in the community to try to build some, you know, long-term improvements to what's going on here. And he's not been making it a political issue the way that the Democrats have. And sometimes, you know, I don't think he gets the credit he deserves. But I think it's important for people, especially outside of Maryland, to understand that, you know, we have a Republican grown-up who's governor of this state. And the difference between Democrats and Republicans in Maryland was on clear display between Monday and the rest of the week.
Greg, quick question. Just to answer your question, our governor, while being the weakest in the nation, can call out the National Guard at his or her whim to deal with anything. We're a much smaller state. Towns and cities are only political subdivisions of the state, so the state has that ability to do what they want when they want, so that's not a problem. But as you're talking about Governor Hogan there, has he gotten pretty good kudos for the way that he's handled it? I know he's tried to be more in the background from looking from up here down to there. Are people seeing that dichotomy of quiet but effective versus loud and ineffective at all?
Because he not only was he prepared, but he also basically moved a mobile headquarters into town and kept that low-key as well.
Yeah, well, you know, he's had his press conferences. I think the media has tended... I don't think he's gotten the credit he deserves, which is one of the reasons I wanted to point it out. I think part of that is, as he said publicly, I'm not here to point fingers or, you know, cast blame. I'm here to solve the problem. But part of it is, too, and having said that, I mean, he pointed out on his press conference on Monday night that exactly what I just told you. He was ready to go. He signed the executive order 30 seconds when he was asked. And he moved very, very quickly and very effectively. And the head of our National Guard here, Major General Singh, has been incredibly impressive in the way that she's handled things and in the media. I don't think he has gotten, because the media has continued to, and some of this is scripted by the mayor of Baltimore, who's had multiple press conferences with local leaders and brought in people to kind of come to her defense, you know, in the way she handled this, because she, you know, it's always a political issue. I'd frankly like to see the governor be a little more assertive in pointing out how he was responsible for bringing this. In the fullness of time, I think we'll see some of that play out, but I don't think he's gotten enough credit.
Okay, let me look at my list real quick.
You know, Harry Truman had a sign on his desk that said, "The buck stops here." He was the president, and there were no excuses for anything that happened below him.
No, and these days we see them all trying to weasel out of any responsibility for their own actions, never mind anybody else's.
That started with Clinton.
Yeah.
All right, Brian Griffiths wrote something at Red Maryland. And,
well, anything that's happened below waist level wasn't his problem.
He, thanks for the aside. He was pointing out some issues with the way the city was funding projects and loans and investment in the city, and how I'm kind of wandering off the reservation here. How they weren't really directing resources to the places that needed it. Do you think this impacted the response? I mean, did it irritate them? Did it really fire up a riot? I mean, was that really necessary?
No. What really allowed things to get out of control was just the poor police response to what was anticipated and what was known. And then when they were engaged, they backed off and gave license essentially to the rioters to get out of control. What Brian's talking about and addressing is the arguments that are being made that this is coming out of some, social justice concern, and, communities that are perpetually disadvantaged economically. And what Brian's pointing out there is, just like the way the police handled the situation over the weekend, the city has been horribly mismanaged when it comes to the way that it handles economic development and economic resources. Look, you have to understand that the politics of Baltimore City, as I mentioned earlier on, it's not remotely competitive. I mean, this is an oligarchy that runs Baltimore City. It's a one-party, and it's not even competitive within the Democratic Party. It's an oligarchy that's funded by development donations and the ministers who have power within the city. And the fact is, the way that economic development is oriented is not only inefficient because it's centrally planned, it's inefficient because it isn't oriented towards economic development results. It's oriented politically. So the development that gets done is not primarily concerned with what would be in the best interest of developing Baltimore. It's who are we giving favors to because they're helping fund our campaigns. And this is compounded by one of the criticisms that Brian wrote in the Baltimore Sun a year ago, which got an immediate reaction from Mayor Stephanie Rawlings Blake, that the mayors of Baltimore for some time have been more concerned about politics outside of the city than they have been fixing the problems in the city themselves.
All right, Brian.
Mayor Rawlings Blake is, if you don't know, he is secretary of the National Democratic Party.
Oh, great.
She is routinely referred to as a rising star in Democratic politics.
We're going to have to cut you off because we're out of time, sir.
Okay.
But we will catch up offline and try to get some of that up on Granite Grok so that our readers and listeners will learn more about it. Thanks a lot for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
All right, we'll see you. Bye-bye. We will be right back.
New Hampshire is famous for scenic drives, but they're tough to enjoy when you're on your way to the doctor. Because Obamacare limits your choices, some will have to drive more than an hour to see a doctor. What's health insurance worth if care isn't there when you need it? Jean Shaheen voted for Obamacare, putting your doctors and hospitals further out of reach. Tell Senator Shaheen Obamacare is not working for New Hampshire.
Jean Shaheen and her allies are making false claims about her record on veterans. The truth? Shaheen refused to meet with veterans pushing for reform. She wasn't on the committee that wrote the reform legislation and refused to co-sponsor important VA reforms in the VA Management Accountability Act until after the VA scandal broke. When our veterans needed her, Jean Shaheen was AWOL. Tell Jean Shaheen to stop distorting the truth and fix the VA.
Hi, this is Rich Gerard, host of Gerard at Large in the Morning. The Manchester area's only locally owned, locally operated, focused, and interested, riveting radio show, heard live every Monday through Friday from 6 to 9 on 90.7 FM WLMW, New Hampshire Family Radio, and available 24/7 live or archived at GerardAtLarge.com. Be sure to tune in.
This is a coalition of New Hampshire taxpayers. We're located at 8 North Main in Concord, New Hampshire. This is a repository for all things conservative and municipal. So if you have a problem in your town, your school, your budget committee, the right to know law, and now the top of our list is voter fraud. You have a tip for us, some information for us, you want to join or help us out, cnht.org.
Talk. 3, 2, 1.
We'd like to welcome you to another edition of Grok Talk, brought to you by New Hampshire's leading conservative blog site, GraniteGrok.com. We are your feared extremist, right-wing, hard-charging, gun-toting, opinionated, outspoken, rabble-rousing, letter-writing, radio microphone stomping conservatives and rational libertarians. So get ready for more news and opinion you could only get from GraniteGrok.com.
Grok Talk.
Okay, we are back. We're sorry we had to cut off the end of that last segment. We probably could have talked about the Baltimore Riots for another half hour. No problem. But we got to move on because there's things to talk about. We have our next guest, Ron Moore, our storm chaser, is on the line. And Skip has a really, really important question for you, Ron. He wants to know, he's got to buy wood for next winter.
Yeah.
So he'd like to know what he should do.
Buy a bunch of it. Yeah, it does look like the third winter in a row coming up. It's going to be snowy and cold.
Yeah,
that's all I needed to hear.
I know it makes. I went out the other day and I actually yesterday I took a picture of the last couple of snow piles in our neighborhood in the woods, kind of the shaded area where they got piled up, and I posted them. I had friends from Florida chiming in how much they hated it and everything, and I said, no, man, that's part of the pleasure of living in New England. You get to stretch it out over a 5-month period,
Well, they're still skiing. This is the last weekend of skiing, but here we are, beginning of May, and there are, I forget who it was that's running it, but they showed people still skiing there, and they're going to ski the entire weekend, even though we're going to be in the 70s.
Isn't that amazing? And what's more amazing is it was just, I think, 8 years ago. I still got some of the clippings that the legislator in the state of New Hampshire and overall New England was dealing with this whole thing about the shortage of snow, how there wouldn't be anymore, and that's what they really were prepping for, was the ski resort shutting down, snow removal not needed. And it's kind of funny how it all reversed, huh?
Yeah, that was Jean Shaheen, the U.S. ambassador from the federal government to New Hampshire.
Isn't that beautiful?
Yeah. Now, and of course, what she was saying that people weren't going to have jobs in the ski industry anymore, and well, the thing that she helped to pass that's bringing that about is Obamacare, because they can't get the seasonal help because the season's just long enough where these resorts have to pay for Obamacare for their workers, and they're saying we have to let them go because we can't afford it. So instead of a nature-caused problem, we have a man-made caused problem, a government-made caused problem.
It's always the problem, man. I tell you, I've studied weather, and I love weather history. I study all the big. It's always been that way. Man gets in the way; he creates the biggest issues. If you just unleash the free market in every instance, even when you have a big disaster, if you let the free market roll. It'll. I said this for Oklahoma when they have a tornado. It's a very small area to hit, and they know how to target it like an army, and they can really do it effectively. Here on the East Coast, we have hurricanes and big storms, and it's a totally different animal, but it's still down to the local community level. And when you get the feds involved, like you said, Jean Shaheen and everything else they want to do with all that, it all ties together, and everything they're passing now, Obamacare included, it has a bad result to the whole thing.
But the complaint is always, but we don't know what will happen. People will get hurt. These people will run wild. It's like, how's that working out for us right now with those in government and those in politics making all the decisions and using other people's money?
Yeah, no, I agree with you completely. The weekend, watch what's happening in Baltimore. Yeah, you see it on display, and it's really sad. It really is.
Yeah. So let's go back to the season. Obviously, here in New Hampshire, we have seen a very cold March. Temperatures running between in April, running 10 to 15 degrees below normal because of the jet stream.
Mm-hmm.
What's in store for us coming up?
I think I agree with some of the other guys out there, again, some of the long rangers and good forecasters, that the early part of the summer we're probably going to spring into it. I've been telling people for a week or two. I don't know if I put it on Facebook, but I was telling folks at church and everything. I said, come Monday of next week, I said we're probably going to crack 80. We're seeing 75, but the heat coming up is just. We have some tropical development going on. We'll probably have. I know you guys have already seen it. There's a good chance of something tropical being off the southeast coast by say next Thursday. And all that does is pump the ridge, which pumps the heat, which pumps the moisture, too. So it's not just going to be, warm up here next week in the 70s, maybe cracking 80 in South New England, but it's also going to be kind of warm and humid with that. It's going to go, no spring. I ran the heater this morning down to 35 here at my house, and Monday afternoon probably be 80,
Great. This is like the fourth year in a row we've gone from the 40s to the 70s in a heartbeat.
Yep. And it's not uncommon in the plains. I used to live out there, and I said you could easily see that in the day, but that's the Great Plains. There's nothing between you and Canada. It's very different here. Mountains, oceans, Gulf Stream, jet stream, everything else kicking in. And so this has been you're right, third year in a row, and it's you don't get to enjoy much spring weather. My parents were just up here from Florida for a week, and they were wearing their coats the whole time. They said, "Does it ever warm up here?" And I said, "Yeah, July." It goes away, but yeah.
So I wanted to ask you, last time we had you on, we talked a bit about the tornado season starting and how it kind of started with a bit of a bang, and then, of course, you pointed out that there's always lots of tornadoes you never hear about. We haven't really had any CNN tornadoes since then. How is that developing? I mean, is there still a lot of activity, or is it a little quieter than we thought it was going to be?
Yeah, it's what most people thought. Again, good forecasters, there's a number of them out there, thought it would be very quiet coming in. Most of the guys that I follow and in my own projections were that, later April and most of May would kick in. We've had a little bit here in April, a few days where it got active. I think May, what you're going to see, because we actually leave for our chase trip in Lake. We're out there the whole last 2 weeks of May up to June 1st. And I think it's going to kick in then. I think the last 2 weeks of May will be very active in the Great Plains. And it usually is. That's not unusual. Memorial Day weekend, that's why I'm always out there that time of year. And it'll probably kick in. New England, I don't think we'll see much this year. I don't think we'll have, the Springfield incident a few years ago. I don't think we're going to have too much opportunity for that because of the colder water off New England and the warm water's off the Mid-Atlantic. How that'll play in hurricane season, that'll be interesting,
I was going to say, I haven't looked at any long ranges yet for the hurricane season. What's the preliminary projection look like?
Not much. In fact, this is the first time I think I've ever seen consensus from the left and right, and that there would not be a lot of action. But as you know, there probably will be at least one or two good hits, and if they are, they would be on the East Coast, just because the warm water has worked its way so close to the coastline. I think the Gulf Stream, is like 50 to 80 miles further west than usual, which it happens. That's not unprecedented. It just happens. But that means that your storms that feed off that could be closer to the Carolinas, Virginia, the Capes, places like that, and certainly the Gulf of Mexico, which is very warm. Most people there too. We wouldn't be surprised to see an early June development. And so in close stuff, not a lot of numbers, and probably nothing in the open Atlantic. I did read Diallo watched this thing this morning on the Pacific. It was really well done, and the Pacific will probably go into hyperdrive. So you're going to see California, the Southwest getting hammered, and of course that will make the news. And in a good way, California needs some rain, so that's where they get it from.
Yeah. I listened to Joe Bastardi a couple weeks back, and he was talking about how they were probably going to get some rain this year, possibly just normal precipitation, which is a huge break given the current situation there, but that the long range for California is still really dry.
Oh, yeah, it is. And that is their climate. That's what kind of drives me crazy when I hear people talk about things. Mm-hmm. The Weather Channel had a thing yesterday, and they went over severe weather for April. It's a very active month. Well, it wasn't, but you've just got more people reporting now. Everybody, even grandma's got her iPhone and videotaping the hail. So it's just everything's coming, which is great. There's a lot of data, but you can't compare that to 10 or 15 or 20 years ago when, people thought they didn't know what they were looking at half the time. Mm-hmm. So it really wasn't an active month. But overall, this is really good for humanity. For me, it's not great because I love chasing these things, but less hurricanes, less tornadoes, even the snowpack we get up here helps with the drought. That's water systems, this is good weather you want. Eventually we're going to slip out of it. We'll go back into more violent weather probably in the next year or two.
So, If I remember correctly, the Pacific is still supposed to flip into its cold stage, and the Atlantic is heading towards a cold stage, and we still have low sunspot activity, and there are some volcanic eruptions, which is the third factor. If we have any more serious eruptions in combination with these other things, are we going to get a lot colder? Because that's generally what the prediction is.
Yeah, and you nailed it. That's what generally all the experts in this field say. Something the other day, did you see the volcano off the coast of Oregon, underwater?
Oh.
And I find it really interesting. It's going, and it's getting more violent. Several people, Ryan Malley, I think, was commenting on one of his blogs about how that people are getting fearful. This thing is getting big, closer to the coast. And I always wonder, I don't think they've done a study, what does that affect the water temperature in the ocean? How does that have an effect? You got a volcano going off underwater, it has to change the temperature of the water.
You would think, yeah, because, I mean...
Yeah, and a lot of those have, they've done a study. I mean, I've never really studied that field very heavily, interested a little bit, but that's pretty significant.
Hasn't the water there been warm lately anyway? I mean...
yeah, off the northwest coast, you mean?
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I know that Joe Bastardi was talking about how that plays into the blocking and how we get our Alberta Clippers and it gets really cold in the Northeast. Yeah, that's an interesting point. I wonder, we're definitely going to have to look into that. Look into that and let us know.
Sure.
I just watched it yesterday. I said, I'm going to have to check more into it, see what studies have been done.
So all that being said, cosmic rays, aerosols, volcanic stuff, that could lead to things being a lot colder. But you also said cold spell in the Atlantic. Does that mean that the Gulf Stream is diverted or is simply not as warm as usual, or is this some other areas or currents, not the Gulf Stream itself?
No, the Gulf Stream itself has migrated a little further west. In fact, Joe Bastardi is the one I actually picked it up from a couple of months ago. He was commenting on that very thing happening. And what's interesting is how it affects the other water temperatures around it. Does all the warm water pool in one place? And this, believe it or not, those currents in the ocean, well, you probably know this, the sea captains used this stuff in the 1600s. I've got books where they would have a ship going along. The ship would be maybe 100 feet long, and from bow to bow, they would record a water temperature difference of 10 to 15 degrees at one end to the other as they hit the Gulf Stream. So people talk extreme today and how warm it is, or with the differential and how tight it is. And I said, I can't get much difference than almost the length of two driveways having a temperature of 15 degrees in the water. So, is this the worst it's ever been? Certainly not. What does it mean? If you look back in those years where those sailors reported that, sometimes they had more violent weather. So weather is a huge package. But as you said, what's happening in the Atlantic Ocean with the currents and everything, it's certainly cool enough out there. It's not going to allow much tropical activity. But like I said, near the coast, it'll be that way.
Yeah,
I would like to. I do know this. I do notice. I read the last reports. I don't know if you guys did, because I know you guys keep up with this. But they've been talking about the ice caps this last week, releasing these reports saying, yeah, it's not nearly as bad as they thought. Yeah, the caps have stopped melting. Yeah, we didn't take into account all these variables. Well, we were taking into account those variables. They weren't. So I wonder who deserves the funding now to move forward, Yeah.
Quick. Okay, sorry.
So
Max,
I worked
go
on
ahead.
merchant ships for about 10 years, and we took temperature readings from both the bow and the stern, and they were frequently different, not just by 1 or 2 degrees, but sometimes 3 or 4 or 5 degrees.
Interesting, yeah. Empirical data right there, man.
Okay,
and that was
Max.
Not lying.
Yeah.
Okay.
Real quick question. You say the Gulf Stream's wandered further west. Does that mean off of the UK? Is Iceland going to be warmer instead, or is it maybe just not so much of Northern Europe and more of the UK and Iceland?
I just started looking at that yesterday, actually, because I usually follow the U.S., and I have involved the U.K. more in the last year. But honestly, I didn't look that far out. I looked up there, but I didn't really assess it and see what the impact would be on that area.
Oh, that's okay.
But it's interesting. I'll get it next time, though, I promise.
Scotland buried under new ice age. No, just kidding.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
All right, so is the summer going to be warmer? I don't know if we covered that.
I think we're going to have, and I agree again, I have to rip off other guys because they've done a good job, like Joby, and others. I think the first half, I think we're going to go to it pretty quick, May, June, early July, and then late July into August, you're going to see it really cool off. I don't think we'll have any extreme temperatures, but that's hard. Sometimes when you have a bad winter in the Northeast, the flip side is you have a rough, 4 to 5 weeks of summertime too, and some people up here wouldn't complain. I personally like it, 80 degrees tops, no humidity. But I think we'll have it, and I think we'll slide into next winter pretty quick because of everything else listed, the sunspots. which is really cool. That's something I never looked at until about 3 years ago. I had some friends at FSU who did study that and were always telling me, they said, hey, we know oceanography, oceans have an effect with sunspots. I was like, maybe. And then I look back, I'm like, why not? Sunspots, the sun? Boy, I mean, it certainly drives this thing.
All right, we're going to sign off here. Thanks a lot for taking some time to talk to us. And when we talk to you next, you'll be back from your storm chasing trip. We'll find out what happened.
Sweet. I look forward to it, man.
All right,
Thanks for having me on.
All right, thank you, sir. Talk to you later.
Have a great
Bye-bye.
day. Bye.
You too.
This is a coalition of New Hampshire taxpayers. We're located at 8 North Main in Concord, New Hampshire. This is a repository for all things conservative and municipal. So if you have a problem in your town, your school, your budget committee, the right to know law, and now the top of our list is voter fraud. You have a tip for us, some information for us, you want to join or help us out, cnht.org.
Hi, this is Rich Gerard, host of Gerard at Large in the Morning, the Manchester area's only locally owned, locally operated, focused, and interested, riveting radio show, heard live every Monday through Friday from 6 to 9 on 90.7 FM WLMW, New Hampshire Family Radio, and available 24/7 live or archived at GerardAtLarge.com. Be sure to tune in.
All right, we're back. We're still talking about weather. Yes, we are. So your headphones are on, so when you do that, it makes a noise. Hey!
I didn't realize we were back so quick.
You were having a great conversation about air masses and stuff, and I was just watching. And
tornadoes.
Yes, we're back. And tornadoes, right. And that's where Ron's going. So next month we'll get a tornado report from our storm chaser on the ground who's actually there. And you won't have to listen to the Weather Channel or whatever. You can listen to us. And but we're in our last segment here. We've got to do the WTF, and I'm just gonna let's just talk about that. There's a lot of choices to choose from, as always. Always a very target-rich environment, but I think we had one in particular.
Which one was that?
Touched on was the NHGOP fundraising off of something they had nothing to do with.
Absolutely.
Okay, so go ahead with that. I'm going to push some buttons and pull some levers, and you go ahead and lead off on that.
All right. So if you look up at on today's Granite Grok, you'll see a big old picture of Jennifer Horn, chairman of the NHGOP. And Susan Olsen put that up, and I think wisely and deservedly so, because Susan Olsen is one of the biggest, if not the biggest, Second Amendment advocate and activist here in the state. And she was the one who helped bring all of the worrying gun clubs together and activists together to try to get SB 116, the constitutional carry, as we call it, or basically we get to be like Vermont if it was to pass. Shepherded that through, got a sponsor, got it through the Senate, got it through the House, and all along Maggie Hassan saying, well, I've got some concerns, and as soon as it was signed off on with the vote, she came out and said, well, we're going to veto it. And there's Jennifer Horn doing like a lot of politicians do, full of faux outrage, but asking people for money to help fight it. Well, the time for fighting it, as Susan Olsen put it quite well, was earlier, during the process. And now here comes Jennifer Horn holding out her money on her knee, holding out her hands and on her knees for money. Help us fight with $5, $10, $15. In essence, she's taking advantage of a political situation that she had nothing to do with. And, this is...
If the party had any principles, it would have been twisting arms and jawboning members to make sure that we had a veto-proof majority up front. They would have been putting their reputation on the line along with upholding their platform and saying, we believe in this, we believe in self-defense, and we're going to make it easier for you, and let's get the most votes that we can up front. And having the party actually come out in favor of what's in its platform doesn't sound like too much, but in fact it would be a shocking thing if it ever really happened.
It would have been a great advantage from the beginning if they had used their ability to get the press's ear. Because anytime a state party chairman says something or issues a press release, the press tends to cover it.
They'll at least read it.
Or they'll at least read it, right. And if they like or don't like it, whatever they want to do, they'll report on that, and it'll be part of the press, and people will know.
Even if they call her a crazy gun nut, the point's got out there.
Right, and so they've been sitting, waiting to see which side of the fence this was going to fall on before they came out and made a statement. So we would have to wonder, what would Jennifer Horn have said if the House had failed to pass this bill?
Well, I look at it from a slightly different viewpoint. This is one of those icky social issues that the NHGOP would just wish would just completely disappear. And we see that with Governor Pataki of New York as he's running his campaign ad where he complains about, well, we shouldn't be talking about abortion or gay marriage anymore or anything of that kind of nature. And I'm going, no, culture drives politics. And just because the NHGOP wants to cede that position and just expect to vote on the fiscal issues, which, except for let's put it this way. After all the time the Democrats have been crashing on the Republicans up in the state capitol, the Republicans still passed, Max confirmed this, basically a budget that's about $400 or $500 billion more than last time. Million than last time.
6% larger than last.
Yeah,
$600 million.
So where's the fiscal frugality that they're supposed to stand for? So they're going to raise the budget, raise the taxes, because you got to pay for this somehow, and they're getting rid of the social issues for which the Democrats keep pounding them on the head for.
They've done a horrible job of messaging that.
Yeah.
Budget increase.
But then you've got, Steve Dupree, who is the NHGOP committee man from New Hampshire to the Republican National Committee for abortion. You've got
at a Planned Parenthood fundraiser.
Right. So here's somebody. Here's the party elite saying we don't want to dabble in these social issues. Well, here's one. Then there's Juliana Bergeron, the New Hampshire committee woman to the RNC, signing on at the Supreme Court amicus brief for gay marriage. It's like, why are these two acting completely counter to the platform? Open your eyes. Open your eyes.
Yeah,
Watch us.
Why are they Republicans?
Well, yeah. And then here's Jennifer Horn just taking advantage of a social issue that the GOP wants to get rid of. You keep wondering, why are we knocking ourselves out for Republicans? I think a lot of grassroots folks are going to start looking at this, and I do have to thank James Pindle of the Boston Globe for bringing up the Steve Dupree thing. And, they're trying to wave their hand saying, oh, it's no big deal. Oh, it's bipartisanship. No, it's not. If you're a high elected Republican official, you ought to at least disavow yourself, just like in the primaries, and say, I can't do this. But when you act contrary to the platform, then you wonder why we get so mad at you. And then, Steve, you have to wonder why me, a couple of cycles ago, just coming out of the stands, having done no campaigning at all, I got almost a full third of all the votes in a race against you, and I hadn't lifted a finger to do a thing. You think that would say something, but obviously not.
Well, Skip's got a nice post from November 8th, 2013 about Steve Dupree bashing the Tea Party with regard to Medicaid expansion, so you can look that up on Granny Grok.
I forgot about that.
Right.
Flat Earthers, Tea Partiers, and Ted Cruz fans wouldn't want to take that federal money.
And let's praise Pindell when he's on the money here, where he says in this short paragraph, for presidential candidates campaigning in the early voting states, the strategy is not as clean as appealing to social conservatives in Iowa and social libertarians in New Hampshire. That's because many New Hampshire Republicans are not happy with their national committee representatives. You don't say.
No, we do say.
Spot on, James.
And yet they still got elected, and this isn't new. These people haven't changed their stripes. They were, Juliana Bergeron and Steve Dupree were these people before they were elected.
And it just points up the dichotomy between the grassroots and the establishment Republicans, where it's been going on forever. And I think what they saw in this last election, and I'm going to toot the horn again, the top two races on the NHGOP ticket lost. And they're still not learning their lesson.
Because they didn't stand for principles and platform, and neither did the party. In fact, the party embraced and encouraged these people to run against the party platform because they said, that's just yokels. You don't have to worry about those. Well, you do. If you want to have the full Republican coalition, all the voters on your side, you darn well need to support the whole party platform and act like a conservative.
Yeah. Otherwise, I think you're going to see a time when people are just going to... Well, people have been walking away. I keep getting the emails. They're saying, due to the actions of the GOP here in New Hampshire, we're done. We're just totally done with it.
I'm not all that certain that the NHGOP leadership cares. They're probably happy to see those people go.
No, they're funded by the big ticket candidates coming through. They're not funded by the grassroots. All these appeals to grassroots givers are basically just a sham. It's not where the real money's at for the NHGOP.
So who do we vote for Senate in 2016? We're not going to vote for Ayotte. Gun owners are not going to vote for Ayotte. They're not going to vote for Hassan. She's about to veto constitutional carry.
We need a challenger from the right, and we need one soon, and we need one that is not going to take Washington money.
Well, the problem is...
It's really hard to run.
It makes it extremely difficult to run. We've seen a lot of...
Or for governor.
A lot of
governor.
A lot of decent candidates that we know wouldn't go D.C. can't get the traction. They can't get their message out. Here we go, Citizens United. If you don't have the money, you can't get your message out. You can't get your free speech out there. And it just doesn't work.
Who's going to run for governor from the Republican side? Bradley?
Sununu's talking about running.
Chris Sununu? Who else? I mean, they would be better than any Democrat, I'll be honest, but I'm not excited.
No, I actually like Chris Sununu. I think he's the more conservative of the bunch, but, I mean, for goodness sake,
he would definitely get money.
Couldn't we do better than one family?
Well, I like Chris Sununu also, and I don't think it's right to, I judge each candidate by
do not
who
visit
they are,
the sins of the father
vote.
upon him.
Exactly. So the reason I'm against Jeb Bush is not because of his...
Jeb Bush or Jeb Bradley or both?
Jeb Bush. It's his support for Common Core and his support for big government and his support for
illegal
immigration
amnesty.
And everything else
that
he supported. He's pretty far to the left. He should be running as a Democrat.
And you keep hearing the number that a lot of conservatives stayed home, and that's why Romney lost in the first place.
Exactly. They did stay home.
And you keep thinking, why isn't the GOP reaching out to these folks, or at least running candidates that appeal to these folks? Now, we've seen Ted Cruz. A lot of people like what he said. I certainly would put him in the top tier, and he's certainly showing it with his fundraising. Carly Fiorina is getting a lot of traction here in New Hampshire. She's
running for vice president, probably.
Well, who knows? Obviously nobody. When you've been a CEO of a top shelf company like she does, you don't want to play second fiddle no matter what. But there are some good candidates.
And she has a good presence.
Yeah, and there are a lot of good folks who are running. The question is, what will happen when we get out of the small states where the retail politics matter and go to the big states where only money talks, because that's how expensive the media costs.
The problem is that even in the small states where retail politics matter, if we don't do something to promote a conservative candidate, Jeb Bush will win anyway with a plurality of 25 to 30%. And this is why we have the 603 Alliance and Conservative Business League formed. And isn't it ironic that Jennifer sent out a fundraiser this week trying to say she's the grassroots? No, party chairwoman. The party is not the grassroots. The grassroots know what they stand for. The party doesn't. When you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything.
All right. That's it. This is Grog Talk. We'll be back next week with we have at least one national guest lined up, and I know that Greg Moore is going to be with us next week, and we'll talk to you later. Bye.
Yeah, baby!
When asked whether she still supports Obamacare, Senator Jeanne Shaheen said,
Yes, I do continue to support the law. We're beginning to see some positive results.
How How can Senator Shaheen say we're seeing positive results when 22,000 of our neighbors have already lost their health insurance? What's worse, the Boston Globe reports the state's only health insurance provider radically reduced the number of hospitals in their network, forcing some people to drive over an hour for lab work, even when there's a hospital within a few miles of their home. When pressed about lack of access, Shaheen said,
there are some hospitals that are not covered, unfortunately, and I certainly hope that's going to change.
Jean Shaheen promised us we could keep our doctors and our health care coverage. Now she hopes we can get to a local hospital? Call Senator Shaheen at 603-647-7500. Tell her we need more than hope. We need leadership. Paid for by Citizens for a Strong New Hampshire.
Senator Jean Shaheen said, if you like your current health plan, you can keep it. That's not true, Senator. 22,000 New Hampshire citizens have been kicked off their insurance plans. Hospitals in Rochester, Concord, and Portsmouth, they aren't allowed to provide care under the exchange. Senator, you were wrong in your comments. You should apologize for your misleading remarks. I'm calling Senator Shaheen at 750-3004 and telling her I want my doctor back. You should too.
Paid for by SaberPack.org, not authorized by any candidate or candidate committee.
All of the music on this program comes to us through Creative Commons licensing from Kevin MacLeod at Incompetech.com. The opinions expressed on this program are those of the speakers, not necessarily those of CNHT, GraniteRock.com, or anyone else for that matter.